Xbox, rest. Rest, my friend. If perhaps this program here is your only window into weekly gaming news, you are not going to believe this. Phil Spencer retiring, Sarah Bond out, Matt Booty promoted as Microsoft AI exec, Asha Sharma named new Xbox boss. That IGN exclusive report dropped on Friday afternoon last week. Seemed sudden, but they had this whole promotional image ready to go. But yeah, that's I would call that a big to-do. And maybe you've seen this coming if you've been doing the math on how Xbox has been performing over the years, but still unexpected in its swiftness. The new management is in place already right now. And heck, The Verge published a headline last summer that Phil Spencer was not retiring anytime soon. What does anytime soon mean to these people? What's kind of crazy about the background of that statement is that there was this Call of Duty leaker who just made a tweet, said that Phil Spencer would be out after the launch of the next Xbox console and would be replaced by Sarah Bond. And the head of Xbox Communications needed to respond to that. Anyway, the details about the rearrangement are this. Sarah Bond is leaving and nobody is replacing what her job was. There will no longer be a president of Xbox. Matt Booty somehow leapfrogged from being president of game content and studios to become chief content officer, a title which did not exist before, and nobody's replacing his old thing. So it kind of just seems like he's doing pretty much the same job, but for presumably a lot more money. Congrats, Matt Booty.
Thank you.
Personally speaking, it's weird to be making this video right now. 1 week later, very suddenly, Phil Spencer is already out of the picture. Whoop. Dynasty over. Bye-bye. Thank you, Xbox fans. So naturally, I've been thinking about his legacy. Like even in that IGN news report, they'll say stuff like long hailed by gamers as being one of their own. Spencer could frequently be found on Xbox Live, playing games regularly with fellow Xbox gamers and racking up a healthy gamer score. Yet, personally, I can't help but see someone who spent year after year eroding his own business. Like, hey, you could say, man, he really righted the ship of the Xbox One, but he was there for most of it, and then proceeded to develop a new product that somehow sold even worse than that one. Game Pass isn't working. Acquiring Activision Blizzard did not improve the Xbox business. The Xbox part of it. Like, basically, they spent a lot of money on something that makes a lot of money. I'm not sure if it was really a good deal or not. There's a lot of revenue coming in. A thing that's been present throughout his entire tenure is that you could see a big game shown at a big game showcase and then within 1 year see that game canceled and its studio destroyed. What I'm saying is, with all due respect, respectfully, Phil Spencer has been failing for 12 years straight. And to her credit, Sarah Bond's been failing too. She's been doing a bad job too as president of Xbox. Because here's the thing. I guess the biggest piece of reporting so far has been this article from The Verge, Inside Microsoft's Big Leadership Shakeup. What you'll find reading the article is that it's strangely finger-pointy at Sarah Bond in particular. Like, get this. I wrote in December 2024 that Bond had staked her career reputation on the idea of Xbox being everywhere across multiple platforms and devices. This also involved carefully managing her image both internally and externally, making her appear to be a gamer like Phil Spencer. In reality, she wasn't. Meanwhile, Xbox could have easily died after the Xbox One disaster, but Spencer made transformative decisions that have benefited the entire gaming industry. Xbox led the way in consumer-friendly decisions like crossplay, or allowing consumers to buy a game once and play it across both PC and console. Under Spencer's watch, Game Pass has also forced competitors to offer similar subscription services. Thank you, Phil Spencer. Thank you for all these subscription services. Now, the reason why I think Phil Spencer is not necessarily considered a failure is that Half of his job was leadership, and half of it was PR.
I see a lot of people who claim I've been trained for this job. I think you all know that there's no training I go through, right? I'm always learning every day, both on the PR side and from the leadership side.
More than I think any other CEO in gaming history, Phil Spencer doubled as a marketing tool. I'm saying it's not the audience's fault if they at any point associated the entire Xbox brand with a single person. Xbox fans became Phil Spencer the human fans, and they could feel assured investing in this entire platform knowing that this guy that they like is leading it. To put it more beautifully than I ever could, here's how professional Xbox fan Jez Corden explains it. Spencer's leadership style, candor, and frank communication style helped him connect with the Xbox audience in ways few gaming execs have. Spencer is an actual gamer, not simply a businessman, and that represented a breath of fresh air in the post-Xbox One period. People bought in. People bought into the idea of Phil Spencer continually. And I will say, the moment that I was surprised by Phil Spencer's candor is when he was on the Kind of Funny Xcast. This was a few days after Redfall came out, and he admitted that Xbox lost to the most important generation.
It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One generation, where everybody built their digital library of games.
Yeah, I'd say across his whole career, that's going to be the performance that stands out to me the most. And I say performance because, yeah, I mean, he still knows he's on a podcast. He's still putting on a show in some manner. But it was tough to see him throw in the towel. Like, he knew at that point Xbox will never win. He knew. But you never like to see him admit it. At that point, he hadn't even tried putting Call of Duty on Game Pass, but he already knew. Truly, though, I don't think Phil Spencer's time as CEO of Microsoft Gaming will be remembered as a failure at all, because I think things are about to get much worse. So the new CEO is Asha Sharma. She joined Microsoft less than 2 years ago. Before this week, she served as president of Microsoft's core AI product. That's okay though. You know, people come from all sorts of other divisions, right? So I would just like to look at how she chose to introduce herself on the old corporate blog. She gets to the point. She's got a list of 3 commitments. First is great games. You think, yeah, okay. Xbox has basically been talking about having great games for 25 years straight. Every new year has brought about the greatest lineup in Xbox history. So not a real impactful bullet point. But look at number 2. The return of Xbox. That is provocative. That is saying something. For the first time, maybe since that old Xcast, somebody is acknowledging that Xbox is not in a good place right now. Naturally, I'm intrigued. I'm pulled in. What does that mean? We will recommit to our core Xbox fans and players, those who have invested with us for the past 25 years, and to the developers who build the expansive universes and experiences that are embraced by players across the world. Okay, so the plan is to commit once again to fans and players, 2 different things, and developers who build experiences. Next sentence. We will celebrate our roots with a renewed commitment to Xbox, starting with console, which has shaped who we are. It connects us to the players and fans who invest in Xbox, and to the developers who build ambitious experiences for it. I gotta say, every English teacher I've ever had would demolish this essay with a red pen. She basically just had the same sentence 2 times in a row. But the one thing that is new, that is different, look at that. Console. That perhaps is the return of Xbox. Back to console, baby. Next sentence. Gaming now lives across devices. All right. Uh-oh. Not within the limits of any single piece of hardware. As we expand across PC, mobile, and cloud, Xbox should feel seamless, instant, and worthy of the communities we serve. So it's unclear to me, frankly, how the return of Xbox is any different from current day Xbox, which is to say, who knows what it is? Fortunately, we've got another exclusive article, this time on Windows Central, from that aforementioned professional Xbox fan, Jez Corden. This is the first ever, and as of recording, the only interview with Asha Sharma as the CEO of Microsoft Gaming. So the first question is simply to ask for clarification on what she meant by the return of Xbox. She says, for me, the spirit of return to Xbox is about returning to the spirit that the team was founded on. It's that spirit of surprise. It's the spirit of building something nobody else was willing to try. I've heard Renegade, Rebellion, and Fun used. That's what I was thinking about when I wrote that. Unfortunately, it seems this could not be followed up by asking, what do you mean you've heard those words used? And then again, it's reiterated that they're starting with console, but also that they're going to reduce the artificial divide between different types of devices. And then Asha Sharma's third focus is future of play. It's like when somebody from Nintendo says the future of play, you get a little excited about what you're about to see. When an AI exec says future of play, you know exactly what they're thinking about. Now, they might say, no, I explicitly said not soulless AI slop. It's just hard for me to imagine that she's implying anything else when she's talking about the future of play. But I feel like in this world, you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe Asha Sharma is some kind of gaming visionary. Maybe she does have unique and cool ideas for what video games can be. Maybe this week she's been busting down doors saying, hey, how come nobody's made a game where you sneak into a barbershop and you sabotage your enemy's haircuts? Just saying maybe. I'm just saying maybe things will work out. Truly, though, my prediction, I'm thinking that in 12 months, people will be saying, I miss Phil Spencer. He wouldn't have ruined Xbox this fast. Because, yeah, I mean, I've been making some pretty rude remarks this entire video, but truthfully, I think that in 2014, Phil Spencer was given the keys to a nasty old beat-up bus, and the passengers said, get us to Guadalupe. There was no way it was going to happen. It was never going to happen for that beat-up bus. But he could have done a worse job, certainly. And that's delayed input. Now, I did upload this video early, and that was so that I could watch the Pokemon Presents live. So if you've been wondering why I've spent this whole video not talking about new Pokemon, it's because for me, it hasn't happened yet. If you want some last minute predictions on the starters, sure. Fire type I think is going to look kind of basic but charismatic. I think the grass type is going to be an absolute abomination. And I think the water type is going to try to look cute, but the eyes will be off in some way. Until next time, thanks for watching. So now that Phil Spencer is no longer CEO of Microsoft Gaming, I thought maybe it would be okay for me to share some offhand experiences I've had with him throughout the years. First, one time, I was standing behind Phil Spencer in line at Starbucks during E3. I mean, that's the whole story. Like we didn't talk, and I don't remember what he said. I think like he was nice to the whole point of that story is that he's a boss. He could have had someone go get coffee for him, but he waited in that long line for no dang reason. That was cool. The second one, fast forward to the year 2023, Gamescom opening night live. So for some reason, one of my responsibilities for these shows is to knock on dressing room doors and then guide guests over to the backstage. And Phil Spencer is there to accept the Green Studio of the Year award. Now, when I'm doing these shows, I try to not be me. I'm definitely not a person who's like, hey, you should check out my YouTube channel. You know, I'm a totally different Kyle. I'm a business Kyle, professional Kyle, right? So when I'm knocking on Phil Spencer's door, I am desperately praying that he doesn't know who I am and doesn't know what I've said in my videos. I'm sweating it out. And obviously you just knock on the door. You know what I mean? You just do what you got to do. You don't have to, you don't say, and by the way, I'm sorry about it. You know what I mean? You just pretend, hope and pray he doesn't know who you are. And opening the door, he didn't know who I was. It was a huge relief. And then I had to like pull him backstage. And at that year, there was a really awkward, like 3 foot by 3 foot roped off area where you can't even see what's happening on the stage. You just have to like imagine and kind of echoing hear like what is happening up there. And that's like a 20-minute thing. They made poor Phil Spencer stand there with me in silence for a long time. But Ed Boon was also on that show. So I grabbed Ed Boon and brought him over, and then he and Phil Spencer, they connected. They were cool. And then last memory, in 2019, Phil Spencer took the stage at the Game Awards to unveil the Xbox Series X for the first time. And rehearsals for the Game Awards generally pretty locked down. And then like there's like a second level of absolutely do not rehearse any of this. And then this thing, the Series X thing, was like this whole other level of ultra secret, ultra need to know. I was certainly not in the loop for this one. So in rehearsals, Phil Spencer does the thing. He comes out on stage and he reads the teleprompter, and it's a completely made up speech. So he's just kind of like babbling for a minute straight. And then at the end, he says, and now I'm proud to announce Game Pass is free. And to 96% of the crew, that doesn't mean anything anyway. They don't care. But I'm sitting there like, what? That's crazy.